We also welcome the moderator, CA Ravichandran Ramdas. Let's hear to the introduction of the speakers now.
I'm Apurva Bhatt, and it's my privilege to introduce CA Ravichandran Ramdas. CA Ravichandran Ramdas is a highly accomplished finance and tax professional with over 30 years of experience across industries like engineering, FMCG, telecom, IT services, logistics, and financial services. He has led major functions in corporate finance, accounting, taxation, risk management, project management, and legal and regulatory compliance, and has held senior roles including Head of Finance, VP and SVP Finance and Accounts, and Chief Manager Risk Management. Academically, he holds an impressive list of qualifications: CPA, CMA, CISA, CISM, FCA, FCMA, ACS, LLM, PGDM, and recently completed his PhD in Management Studies. He has published over 14 research papers, written book chapters, and received multiple Best Paper awards with research interests spanning taxation, AI, fintech, and sustainability. He currently works as an independent consultant, advising on finance, taxation, ICFR, and commercial management. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming CA Ravichandran Ramdas.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for the session, Mr. Mukul Pachisia, who is the head and CEO of EY GDS Global GCC Services. Mukul has got over 3 decades of exposure in finance, accounting, risk advisory, taxation, and process, including innovations, controls, and related areas. He has diverse experience having set up GCCs with base level from scratch to 75,000 and has a wide span of experience across domains and sectors. Without wasting much of time, I would now request Mukul to take over the floor. All yours, Mukul.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Ravi. It's a pleasure to be here, today with all of you, sharing some of my practical experiences, hopefully over the last few decades within, GCCs. I've been, as I said, I've been part of the GCC for a very long time. I've been associated now for over 2 decades out of my 3 decades of experience with GCCs, and I'm hoping that through this session, at least I'm able to, talk about a few of the experiences. The topic, though, given to me today is decoding GCC expectations, the CA edge. We talked about, Viksit Bharat, global ambition, that we are after, and we are at an intersection, where along with the global ambition, we have wonderful capability. And what we'll explore, through this session today is how CAs can not only be part of the journey, but can accelerate the journey and create something, which is bigger and better. That's the objective, that I would want to accomplish with the session today. In terms of the flow for the next 15-20 minutes or so, we'll walk through, the overview of GCCs. I'll not take too much of time over there because I'm sure, through the day we've covered quite a bit of it. But, what we will then do is, get into the evolution of GCCs, particularly from a talent perspective. And this is, going to be focused from a career opportunity perspective within GCCs. So that's the lens through which, I will, dive in a little bit more and explore some of the roles that we have seen come up, within GCCs, focused on, finance roles, some of the foundational roles as well as some of the emerging roles that have been coming up in the past few years, and what we believe will continue to come up in the coming years as well. And what kind of capabilities then do we need as finance professionals in order to be ahead of the curve as these opportunities come up. So that's what we will explore as we go on in this particular session. So at the end of the session, obviously, what I would expect is people are more or less clear about the direction of travel. Things are evolving at a pretty quick pace within the GCCs. GCCs are scaling up, but things are evolving also at a pretty enormous pace, particularly with the impact of AI, and within that Gen AI that is coming up. Obviously, there are multiple other sessions that are going to cover the impact of AI, so I'll not go deeper into that as part of this session, but the impact that it is having is tremendous, and it's going to definitely disrupt the industry. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. If we were to look at the GCCs overall, I'm sure some of the numbers over here would be pretty familiar to you by now. Close to 2 million people that are employed within the GCCs currently, and around 80,000 CAs who are already part of the GCCs itself. Since we are in Bangalore, I thought one of the key points to highlight is Bangalore hosts almost a third of the overall talent population from a GCC perspective today. Something that the other cities are obviously catching up on, and we need to ensure that we have the cutting edge for Bangalore and also the tier 2, 3 cities around Bangalore as well. As accountants, the first thing that we do looking at these charts is look at how these numbers stack up to each other, implications, etc. But my objective over here in this particular slide is twofold. One is to look at the opportunity that's there ahead. Obviously we are where we are through a lot of hard work over the last couple of decades that we have gotten over here, but the opportunity that lies ahead is significant. We're talking of close to 3 million people being employed within GCCs in India over the next 5 years. A lot of new units, roughly 500 more, setting up shop over the coming years as well. And this set of numbers, if you were asking somebody a year and a half back, it was actually much higher. People were talking of 4 million, 4.5 million, people within GCCs. But with the advent of, new technologies and, like I said, AI in particular, it's moderated a bit, but still, the growth opportunity is tremendous. So that's the lens that I wanted to, everyone to focus on. But the second lens over here that I wanted everyone to focus on is something beyond the numbers that are there over here. We take great pride, obviously, in terms of some of the, numbers that are there over here. But what I encourage people to think about is not just these numbers, but it's beyond the numbers, the value that is being added by the GCCs. And that's the mindset what I want people to think about, specifically. So going beyond the numbers, to the value add. And the value that these GCCs are adding, to their parent enterprises is tremendous. The way we used to measure KPIs within the GCCs, the SLAs, and so on and so forth, over the years, it's significantly evolved. Earlier we would say, no, we do around 20% of our parent, 40% of our parents' businesses being done from the GCCs. We no longer talk in that currency. We talk about what's the impact on the revenues overall? What's the impact on employee experience, customer experience? What's the impact on margins, on account of how we carry out the work from GCCs? How have the quality indexes moved, over the years as work has been offshored into the GCCs? So we are talking much more beyond the input metrics now to the value and the output. So what I would encourage everyone to think about is what's the value that we can add as we develop our careers within GCCs, not just developing the GCCs, but developing our own selves and also adding value, obviously, to the country's ecosystem as well. So that's the message that I wanted to leave on this particular slide, in terms of looking at not just the numerical numbers around how many people, how many centers, and so on and so forth, but what's the overall value that we are adding to the entire global ecosystem itself. Now, if you move on in terms of just the evolution of GCCs over the years, during the 90s, meaning actually during the 80s is when it kind of started, called different names over the years. GCC is the current buzzword, but a lot of names that it has evolved over the decades. But back in the 90s, and the 2000 as well, they were just outposts of the MNCs. That is all they were, providing some specific task-based, stuff. Some kind of transactional efficiency would be the, baseline goal of GCCs. And that's how, the entire journey started. And then over a period of time, if you think around, 2015 or thereabouts, plus or minus few years, depends on how we capture it in the horizon. But that's where, the satellite offices, as they were called back then, started, coming up. We became central tech hubs. Tech and R&D is where it all kind of began in a big way initially. And then we started piloting innovation, started piloting AI, analytics, and various other things from a technology perspective. The focus from a talent pool perspective was on operational excellence. So it shifted from just the transactional efficiency to operational excellence, and the talent then started being curated in that particular manner. But as we stand today, what are we in the GCCs? We are innovation orchestrators and second headquarters, for our own parent companies and the MNCs that we talked about. Driving transformation not just within the GCC and for the GCC's operation, but driving transformation for the overall enterprise. Directly interacting with, clients and customers versus interacting through our, onshore units, so to say. Building the IP, not just kind of taking orders in from an MNC, headquartered, perspective, but then guiding the strategy of the organization and being recognized now in multiple different organizations as a second headquarter. In terms of headcount of people that are, there in many of the GCCs now, at least, I'm very proud to say that, a lot of them, this would be their largest center now. It's no longer, the second largest center, and it's called a dual headquarter model now. What that really means from a talent pool perspective is that, the talent has evolved. The type of people who are being employed within the GCCs continues to evolve. There's been a lot of effort that is being spent in terms of reskilling of people, as people go up the value curve itself. A lot of stuff that is being done in terms of, technology, as we get into this. But the key message I wanted to also, leave on this particular slide is in terms of leadership. Over the years, people would have experienced that the leaders would be somewhere outside, and people within the GCCs would be kind of, at the second, third level of the pyramid. The model has now evolved in such a way that in many of the advanced GCCs, global leadership is based out of the GCCs now, driving the enterprise forward. Almost a third of the leadership roles is what now resides in many of the advanced GCCs within India. And that's the evolution, that we have, gone and taken, over a period of time. It's taken a while, but for the GCCs that are the more mature GCCs, within India, they have leaders who are not just leaders of the Indian enterprises, but they're leaders of the global enterprise. Now, if we look at this particular evolution and maybe, start thinking about it from a CA lens as well, if you look at the journey, so we should not just think about the transactional efficiency and, like I said earlier, move beyond the transactional efficiency to, looking at the bigger picture. And that is what, I would, leave on this particular side, that, we think about the bigger picture, lead from the front. That's what is expected now of us in the GCCs. We are the ones who are supposed to be innovating, and not just innovating as a pilot process, but innovating at scale and deploying it within, India, and then deploying it across the globe as well. And that's the entire evolution, that has happened, over the last few decades, and where we can add value in terms of the overall journey itself. Moving on, as I said, some of the finance roles within GCCs, again, if you look at this particular slide, on the left, the core finance, operations itself that were being carried out, from the GCCs, they still are being carried out. So these are foundational. It's not like, we have left behind some of the, roles. The core finance ops is where it all began. We moved into, decision support. That was kind of moving up the value chain. So we started looking at, FP&A kind of roles, planning, business planning, and a lot of support that was being rendered in those areas. We moved into risk, governance, and treasury. And there's a lot of BFSI, sector, that started hiring within India. So we, started a lot of work in that. But the last one that you see over here is what I wanted to stress upon in terms of, digital transformation and innovation. Those are the places where we see a lot of these foundational, roles that have, come up, particularly in the last few years. And that's an area that we need to, pause and reflect upon, as, CAs as well as people in the finance profession. So it's not just about the foundational roles. We are good in the foundational roles, and that is very, very well established. But along with the foundational roles, the two other things that we need to focus on, one is in terms of digital fluency. Lots of talk that has obviously been going on over the years, which has accelerated on the technology, space, and the tools and the various things that Gen AI is able to do, and the agents that are coming in now as well. But without that digital fluency, just banking on our core finance skills, I don't think we can have the same kind of impact as we can have if we are fluent in digital skills. Fluency obviously means different things to different people, but we definitely need to be, embracing the talent and the technology talent within us if we were to move beyond, what we have been doing in the traditional world. The second thing is in terms of the business partnering. Now, apart from technology, if we have to move up the value curve in terms of leadership roles and have the same kind of impact that we would otherwise have just based on the transactions that we would have been otherwise processing, we need to have the skills to, partner well along with our stakeholders and have that collaborative mindset to partner along. Those two skills are, fundamental as we move up, the value chain. In terms of the trajectory itself, there have been a lot of instances now, like I said, where people have been taking on leadership roles. When we talk as an example on this slide on the CFO of GCCs, we're not talking of CFO of the GCC alone. We are talking of CFOs based in the GCC who are CFOs of the enterprise itself. Those are the kind of roles that people would then aspire to get into from a foundational perspective. The other thing on this slide is in terms of the sectors. I think we, in the prior session, talked a lot about the BFSI, sector as well. But, across all the sectors, we see, tremendous growth in the GCCs. And that is another area where we can start, looking at how we can specialize in some of these sectors as well, apart from, just expanding our horizon on the different nature of roles. Now, if we were to move beyond the foundational elements and the traditional, roles that we were talking about, here are some of the themes that have been there in terms of the new frontiers for finance talent in GCCs. First and foremost is the AI-driven finance and advanced analytics. That's an area that we have seen tremendously coming up, over the last, few years. You've developed a lot of forecasting models, even internally within EY and, in many of the clients that we're working with as well. And where forecasting is literally done in seconds. You have business drivers, you have, all the other assumptions, you have various data points on sales and pipelines and, how things are moving from a complete perspective. And shifting a few of the parameters, you would have forecasts that are there in seconds and minutes. Compare it to, what we would otherwise be doing, we would be basically doing sometimes zero-based budgeting and or roll forward forecast, traditionally trend analysis and all that kind of stuff. We move beyond all of that. And that's a skill that now is very, very critical within the GCCs because, the overseas enterprises, cannot run their businesses without this particular skill. Everyone needs information, very quickly. The last piece on this particular slide in terms of data, AI and data obviously go hand in hand. Both of them can't be, just going standalone. AI doesn't work well without a good, database and a cleansed data. So both of them kind of work hand in hand. Few other things, whether it's regulatory, technology, digital products, risk and treasury analysis, a lot of the banks, a lot of banks that we've worked with, HSBC is one example, Stanchart another one. A lot of the portfolio risk, modeling, the stress testing, a lot of the dashboarding, which is all done by, quasi-finance professionals, if I can call them so. But the landscape has widened so much that it's no longer, the foundational skills and the foundational roles that we were earlier talking about, but a lot more. Sustainability is another area. Obviously, a lot of move, across the globe that is there on ESG reporting, ESG metrics. A lot of these would not be possible if our foundational elements were not in place. But now that we have achieved some of those foundational elements, these are the new things that we need to be, absolutely looking forward to. Many of them, like I said, have already been, on that journey. It's not like these are brand new things. People have been experimenting with this for a while, but we, see that this is going to be, the way forward in terms of how we can not just broaden the horizon of what we can do, but also start specializing in some of them to have, more impact on the entire ecosystem itself. Now, in order to do this, what are the different, capabilities that are required in the evolving, landscape? I've broken it down, for simplicity into 4. There could be, different ways of obviously looking at it. First and foremost is on the technical and analytical excellence. Now, that's something which is kind of, baseline, which many of us would, understand. But within that, the emerging skill is in terms of AI, ML, and automation, data analytics, and visualization. That's something that has emerged over the last few years, and it continues to be, evolving, day by day, with Gen AI particularly. So from a, kind of functional technical perspective, that is one of the skills that we all should be, continuing to invest, our time in. The second one is strategic and innovative mindset. Now, in terms of the emerging skill over here, innovation, and we talked about different types of innovation. Technical is one, meaning technology side of it is one. But even looking at it from a value lens perspective, how well can we apply our critical thinking into improvement of processes, applying technology, and then applying a strategic lens in order to have an end-to-end view. Now, that's not something that the GCCs historically were accustomed to, because GCCs would not get an end-to-end view. They would be doing part of the processes only historically. But over the years, through its evolution, now more end-to-end work is being performed at the GCCs, allowing a more structured view to be available, the big picture to be visible, and that's where we can add tremendous value in the overall journey. The third one is in terms of personal growth and global agility. What I mean over here is that we need to develop the global mindset. It's no longer enough if we are able to kind of talk culturally, as an example, only about our ecosystem. We have to be aware of the cultures, across the globe, because we are servicing, over 100 countries, from here. Gone are the days when we used to service only 3-4 markets and we used to feel happy about it, learn a few things about those markets and then, move on from there. If we need to grow at the pace that we want to grow within the GCCs, the global mindset and understanding different cultures, of different geographies where, our stakeholders, our clients, our customers are based is very, very critical. I've not talked too much about, ethical intelligence, but that's, something that I am personally very, passionate about. We all know the importance of ethics. We all know, that we need to do the right thing, at all points of time, but doing it in this environment with empathy. Doing it, not just in the right way, but in the way where people feel valued is very, very critical as well. Last but not the least, in terms of collaborative and influential leadership. Now this, at least talking to people who are outside the GCC seems to be a very underrated thing. But, people who are within GCCs and who have been understanding GCCs would possibly be able to relate to this. The ability to influence without asserting authority is something that we all grow up in, a GCC with. You need to perform but the person may not have reporting line to you. You need to perform, but the leadership may be sitting somewhere, and you need to figure out how to influence, the global decisions, sitting out of the GCCs itself. So collaboration is very critical. Building relationships in that environment is very critical if we need to grow in a GCC enterprise itself. And this is, something, like I said, very underrated, but something that we need to build in order to not just, develop the GCCs, but develop ourselves as well in the global enterprises, across the globe. Collaboration, meaning I talked about it from a different lens in the earlier, slide, but, if you look at this particular slide, how do we accomplish, some of this from a talent pool perspective? Obviously, the GCCs, the policymakers, and the academia need to come together. I mean, the magic lies if everyone obviously collaborates, together to build this particular ecosystem in a manner in which we can scale up, not just, scale up from just a sheer volume perspective, but scale up also in terms of a transformative leadership mindset perspective as well. The skills that we talked about earlier, it's not just about the skills, it's the mindset with which we are able to develop, some of it and have the right impact. So a lot of stuff that the GCCs obviously need to continue to do in terms of building that, forward-looking momentum, looking at, what's going to be required ahead, but then also leaning on the academia, ICAI included, in terms of building that creating those curriculums in order to future-ready, us. Because without that particular role being played across, the ecosystem, including from the government side in terms of incentives and infrastructure, we're not going to be able to do it, all alone. So collaboration is, very, very important. The GCCs, like I mentioned earlier, have been living in that environment, with their global enterprises. But the magic is obviously, all of this coming together, which, frankly has been happening and needs to scale up, if we need to scale up, the GCCs over the future. The last thing on this particular slide that I wanted to mention is we can only go that far, individually. But if we have to be bold and deliver to the vision, we have to absolutely do it, together. Without that, we are going to be kind of moving around in silos, and independently then we can only deliver, very, small part of, what we envision to deliver. So that's the thing that I wanted to kind of leave all of you on this particular slide. And, my very final one, GCCs obviously are ready and eager to grow in India. The real question is, are we ready to seize the opportunity? I would in fact, go on to say it's not just about seizing the opportunity. The world is such today that we need to create and seize the opportunity that lies ahead. That's the way that we can have, the maximum impact, across our ecosystem, collaborate with each other, and obviously we would not be looking at this as, closed doors. You'd be looking at it in terms of, opening these doors and looking at it, in terms of what's ahead, and, going out and creating that high impact, across the ecosystem. So this is what I had, for the day. We'll look forward to some questions possibly, after the next speaker comes in as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mukul. It was an insightful presentation, and I hope the audience enjoyed it, the many parts of it, especially the last two slides. I now introduce the next speaker. He is Mr. Ashwin Ramchandra Pai. He's a seasoned chartered accountant and having experience of over 2 decades, both in domestic and international experience across finance, business finance, audits, project management, technology, retail and manufacturing industries. He's committed to enabling business growth through structured financial enablement, transparent ecosystems, and disciplined fiscal decision making. He has got a 360-degree view of finance leadership functions and is able to drive stability, scalability, and value creation for globally reputed organizations, currently with Zinno Consulting, Director. and CFO. Welcome, Ashwin. Ashwin, bhai.
Everyone, I am Champalal Prajapati. It's my privilege to introduce CA Ashwin Pai, speaker of this session. A seasoned chartered accountant and finance leader with over 19 years of diversified domestic and international experience across controllership, business finance, audits, and project management for organizations across technology, retail, and manufacturing industries, demonstrates a consistent track record of building and leading.
Stop this. Am I audible? A small correction, I am not a CFO of Zeno, so I'm a Director of Finance. So I see a lot of tired faces because I guess you've been hearing GCC 10,000 times now. So I'll keep it very short. It's not too much to cover because many things have been already covered. So before I start my session, I want to take a step back and I want to cover what is GCC, right? So what are the different phases which are involved in GCC, right? So it all starts from the design phase. So someone sitting in US or outside India decides that he has to move. Sorry, is it audible now? He has to move some of the operations, some of the roles to India. So that's the stage where design gets decided. So now once design is kind of completed, then the next challenge would be to come and set up the entity in India, right? So that's again different challenges involved there. You have to strategize like which is the place where you want to kind of set up the GCC. There are ample options, right? So if it is a tech GCC, it's always Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, preferred location, but we are looking at some other tier 2 cities as well now. And also the talent pool also matters, right? So which are the cities where you have a peer who has already recruited the talent? So that also matters because you have to kind of poach those people so that it's easy to set up the GCC and run your operations. And of course, real estate is one more important aspect where you have to look at where to invest, where to set up the office. So nowadays in Bangalore, if someone gets a job in Whitefield and if he stays in South Bangalore, he'll say, I will not come to your company, even if you offer me a better role. I would prefer to be at South, near to Electronic City. So that also matters, like where is the talent pool, where is the company set up, and how frequently employees have to come to office. So those are the decision making which has to happen during the setup phase. And again, of course, you have to also take some administrative aspects like setting up the entity, getting registrations done, making sure all your infrastructure is kind of built very fast so that the office is ready for operations. So those are the things which you do during the build phase. Then comes the operate phase. So operate phase is nothing but you start hiring, right? So GCC means the biggest asset is an employee, right? So you should start hiring. You should start kind of onboard the vendors. You should start kind of pay employees, run the operations, and start delivering on the projects which are agreed with the global companies. So that's where the operation comes into. Now, if I had to look at the time scale, the design and build will take at least 6 months' time. That's our experience. Then the operate will start, and to stabilize, it will take at least 1 year. And after a year, you will think of what more, right? I started as a tech GCC. Can I explore bringing in some operations, back office functions like HR, finance, procurement? So those are the things which you will do after maybe 1 or 2 years. That's where you transform. So that's I'll not say transfer, bot model, transform. So I'll look at what next. So why I'm talking about all these stages is because we as a chartered accountant have a very key role to play in each of these stages. So you may say, okay, what role I have in deciding where to set up the office? I still have. Why? Because I will decide the budget. I will decide what should be my spend towards the facility. I will decide what should be my per employee average cost. right? So that's where finance comes into picture. So I should be consulted before all these decisions are taken. So that's where I will start my session with. And my focus area is to look at all these three stages and look at what, as a chartered accountant, I have to support the business. So I already covered this, like challenges for GCCs in India. That's the focus area. And how, as a chartered accountant, we can support. When I say as a chartered accountant, I need not be in-house chartered accountant. I can be a practicing CA firm as well, right? So that's the core area. And again, there are some regulatory support. We already covered some of the incentives, GIFT City and all, right? So some government coming up and giving some incentives so that we can have a smooth function of that GCC. Without wasting time, let's get into build phase. So the typical challenge is the entity setup. Now you can say it is very simple, right? What I have to do? I have to just fill the form, give it to ROC, they will process it, and entity is up and running. No. As a chartered accountant, you have to do a finance modeler. You have to see what if it is private limited company, what if it is a LLP, as a long term, what is beneficial, because we will generate excess cash in India, right? It's always a cost plus entity. You can imagine the margin resides in India. So you have to repatriate back the dividend. So whether it is beneficial to have a private limited company or a LLP, that's the decision which chartered accountant own. You have to be a business partner with this management to decide which type of entity you want to kind of set up in India. Then comes this tax structuring. Again, tax structuring, when I say, it's nothing to do with what tax compliances have to take care of. It's more to do with what nature of services you are operating in India. That has its own implication. Why? Because the emerging TP issues, if you are aware of, and I'm sure you are all aware of, there are many emerging TP issues coming GCC's way. So as a chartered accountant, I should make sure the management knows what all guardrails they should have in terms of functioning in India. I've been hearing from morning, I don't want to be a cost center, I want to be a value add center. Perfect, fine, that's how we will project India. But tax authorities will come and say, you are no more a cost plus entity. You are adding value. Why are you just having margin of 15%? Why can't you have a profit share model? Why the margin should not be 21%? That's where you have to plan it well and educate the management well, how to kind of project your nature of operations. So that's one thing which comes under tax structuring. Of course, finance processes and policies are very important, where we again look at global policies, processes, and try to standardize that in India. But we still have to do a customization in terms of local requirements, right? Because there are gap differences, tax differences, all that we have to keep in mind while we kind of set up the finance processes and policies. And of course, during the build phase, various registrations. There are state-specific registrations as well as central law-driven registrations, which we can support them on. Of course, labor code is something which is coming our way. It may change a bit, but I don't want to deep dive into it. The other setup which we have to be very careful during the build phase is which ERP to use, how the payroll setup should be. That's where the chartered accountants, practicing chartered accountants have a role to play. ERP, we all know, it's a known issue in India that global providers, service providers, they are not meeting some of the compliances in India, right? So how I start with very basic ERP, maybe Tally or Zoho or some basic stuff. And then when I scale up, I try to migrate. That can be the strategy. As a chartered accountant, you can advise them. Same way, payroll is a big process. As if you look at various studies, payroll cost is almost 70% of my total cost in a GCC. So you can imagine, payroll covers my 70% of the process. So that has to be very, very important process. And while setting it up, you should set up for the long term. You can start with 50 employees, but you have an aspiration to become 500 employees. So your setup and the tool should adhere to that scale, which is 500 employees. And again, various compliance is to be taken care. The payroll tool should comply with all these requirements which are there from labor laws, from income tax perspective. So all that assessment has to be done. You as a chartered accountant can provide this service to the client. Corporate governance, again, is a very important piece. When I say corporate governance, it's nothing to do with only with board of directors and the board frame, but also from various internal controls, right? Various authority matrices which you have to introduce. So there again, you can build up template and be a strategic advisor to the client as to at this operation, what should be the bare minimum controls, what should be the process. So that's where you play again a very key important role. So I've covered major ones which are there in build phase. And of course, support side, I have just given some of the probable services which you can offer. I've touched upon tax structuring. There again, I missed on SEZ, SCPI, FEMA compliances, right? So I have experienced this. Many clients do Google or ChatGPT and they'll come and say, why can't I have a SEZ in India? But really there is no benefit if you look at it, unless you are heavily into CapEx investment and you're bringing some of the equipments from outside India. That's where you have a custom benefit. But there is no tax benefit beyond that. So we have to evaluate all this and make them aware what is there, what is not there, right? So that's again one more important aspect. So I will move to the next phase. This is again very important phase, operate phase. That's where you can be an outsourced partner as well, right? But you have to pitch for it. What can be outsourced? A bookkeeping, which can be maintained by the chartered accountants, practicing chartered accountants, a payroll setup, payroll running, as well as making sure their books are clean and ready for audits, giving them some CFO dashboards. When I say CFO dashboards, nowadays everyone is talking about automation, right? So how your ERP is capable to provide the real-time data to CFO. I was attending one of the event where I came to know that there can be a solution like this. A CFO wakes up in the morning, he just looks at his mobile and he knows all metrics until yesterday. That's the kind of automation people are thinking about. He need not wait for book close to happen, you to publish balance sheet. He has to just log into the dashboard and look at it. So can we provide that service as well? So we have to upskill ourselves. We can't be a normal accountant. We have to be a business partner as well. Then again, of course, tax compliances, labor and FEMA compliances, these are all part and parcel of our profession. You can always be a service provider for that. One important aspect, which is next topic, which is ICFR and SOX readiness. So maybe first few years, they may be not having this as a requirement because of the thresholds. But if you look at it from global perspective, it's better to have this implemented early so that they are ready when it is applicable to them. So you can also be a service provider. Chartered accountants can bring in their expertise, the benchmark from various other experiences, and kind of implement all these processes in their company. Of course, budgets and cost optimizations are very important because even if we say we don't want to be a cost center, we want to be a value add center, we still want to control the cost. We are responsible to control the cost. So all my clients ask me, what's the average cost per FTE for all tech GCC? Now, why is he asking this question? He's asking this question because he wants to see whether he's beyond it or below it. That means you want to control the cost. So those are the inputs which, as a chartered accountant, you should give it to the management and guide them where we are going wrong or where there is a scope for improvement or where we are doing very well. So all these dashboards will help them to take some critical management decisions. So that capability and skill has to be developed by every chartered accountant. Audits are very normal. It's there for decades now. But what is changing is audits are not, it's not like ticking the watches and saying it's all right. it's more of value add as well. So you have to bring in your experiences from any other audits. You have to give the management letter in terms of what can be improved on the processes. You should use advanced technologies so that the audit becomes very simpler and a good experience for the client as well. So that's somewhere you have to invest on your technology as well. You can't just depute articles on audit and say, watch the, look at the documents and watch and come. You should use the advanced technology tools so that it is more simple. The last piece is very important because when we are setting up the finance processes and policies, we also should evaluate what are the differences compared to the global standards. Because ultimately your reports are going to be consolidated in US or outside India. So that means you should be aware what differences are there and how I can minimize it. So it's not only identifying, but also looking at the middle path where I can kind of have minimal differences. So that again is a very critical role and skill which you have to develop. Every client looks for it because ultimately what they are bothered is a primary book, what gets into their consolidated financials. And that's where we want to not have much deviation from local standards. But of course, we have to be compliant with local gaps as well. So those are the things which I will say are important for operate phase. Now coming to transform phase, this is something which is after 2 years or 2 year plus, where you will think of what next, right? Which I kind of touched upon. Definitely if we are started with a very simple ERP, and this is the time where you want to move to a global ERP because the interfacing and the reporting as well as consolidation becomes very easy. And that's where you have to have a change management. You should be ready to guide the client or the company what needs to be taken care when you are migrating from one ERP to the other ERP, and also keeping in mind local compliances. Automation, AI solutions are very important. We are already seeing many of our companies or clients where some of the junior roles are replaced by some AI solutions. I will give you some simple example. RPA solution on processing the AP invoices. That's become very common process, right? So again, you should be ready, and you, if possible, you should also invest in some technology to have your own tool which can be used by the client for automation. And I have some friends over here who are providing such tools to my clients. So they've developed in-house. So you can look at that as well. A very simple basic tool which will serve the junior roles, the processing of AP invoices or AR management, cash forecasting. The next phase would be what next? What I said was they start as a tech GCC, then they will evaluate what my peers are doing, right? They are bringing in the center of excellence. They are bringing in kind of finance back office, HR or tax. So if they want to set up a center of excellence, they have to be advised well. And we are best suited to advise them well. What should be the process? Which roles they can bring to India? How it should be set up? Whether we hire leaders first or juniors first? What should be the approach? All that can be part of your services as well. And that's where you have to invest in knowing how to set up a center of excellence, what roles to bring it in India. Then data governance and standardization has become very important now. We have many laws covering this. This, again, you have to be very careful and implement across your clients. And continuous improvements is something which I have seen in last 2 decades. I started my career when accounts were kept with handwritten ledgers. Now we are talking about automation. So there is a continuous improvement. So that's something you should always have in your skill. So this is my last slide on transform phase. The next slide I don't want to deep dive into. This is more of various state policies, which everyone know, I guess, already. Why I wanted to highlight this is because this again becomes one more area we can support the management, either at the setup phase or at the phase where they want to expand. Now, as a CA, you can make yourself familiar on various state specific incentives and the process what needs to be done. If you can be expert on this space, you can go and help them in getting these incentives, right? And Karnataka is very important for at least Bangalore people, where there are various incentives which many GCCs are not still evaluating. So we can be a service provider to go and pitch for that. So that's my last slide. I kept it very short because I was told there's a time crunch. I hope this was very useful for you. If any queries, happy to connect, and look forward to next session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashwin. It's a nice presentation. Now I invite the audience to come up with questions, if any. Anyone has got a question? Hello?
Dear members, a small announcement that tomorrow morning breakfast will be arranged from 8 o'clock to 9:15.
Yeah, firstly, Ashwin and Mukul, thank you so much for your presentation. I think very helpful insights. I think between the both of you have got several decades of GCC experience. Now the question is that going with the theme of the session, right, chartered accountants and GCC ecosystem, what are the skill set that you feel that as chartered accountants we naturally have that can really come in handy as far as the GCC setup is concerned? And what are the areas of improvement that you think that we can bring about? So both on the strength and the areas of improvement, if you can talk about that based on your experience.
Mukul, first to you.
I think a little bit of it I did cover the section today as well. So if we start with, what are the skills that are, already there? If you look at the technical and analytical set I spoke about, that's something that is, essential in most of the finance roles in GCCs. And that's the one that we need to, continue to harness as we, go up the value chain. And I think, the knowledge of laws which we have, I think that's tremendous as well. The thing that we need to expand it into in a GCC environment is also the knowledge of global laws and not just the Indian laws itself. But apart from that, the one additional thing which has been there now for a few years, but more so now, is the technical skills itself in terms of digital fluency that I was talking about. Looking at all the AI-based tools, particularly that are coming out, now the Gen AI ones, the autonomous agents that are now, getting developed. Sounds scary at times, but that is reality. It is coming. The pace will depend on, how some of the regulatory environment around it or the risk around it is managed, and the cost, that will obviously need to be incurred to deploy. But it is around the horizon, so that that's an area that I would say we need to be ahead of in order to stay in the game. Anything more, Ashwin?
I think I agree with Mukul, but one important skill, which is communication as well as soft skill, is very important to develop. You will be the only finance in the boardroom, finance person in the boardroom and talking about finance. And there, if you talk plain language of compliances, they will say, I'm not understanding what you're saying. So storytelling is something which is very much required as a finance professional. That's my learning. If I go and say Section 184 of Companies Act requires this, they'll look at stars, right? So we have to develop that storytelling so that the non-finance person also understands. And of course, all other essential skills Mukul touched upon. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, I'll ask one question, last question. How do you think CAs should adapt to the evolving expectation of GCCs in the digital situation? Emerging.
I think it needs to be part of the curriculum, and that's what we have been doing now for some time. It needs to be accelerated. No longer can we look at only, let's finish our CA curriculum and then we will look at, what are the additional skills from a digital perspective that need to be acquired. It needs to be run actually in parallel. All of us have been working towards, how can we get ourselves ready for employment at the time we are qualified and not having to train, further beyond that. Part of the challenges in GCCs had been not just from a digital perspective, but just getting people employment ready, so to say. And nowadays, with most of the GCCs embracing, technology, I think that's something that has to be done, alongside the core curriculum itself. And some certification programs that are there, both from the institute and other places, there's tremendous amount of information and learning available. I think now it's a question of, there are many things available, which one of them, makes sense, where am I passionate about, where should I invest my time into in order to make a difference in the sector that I need to get into. So that's something that we need to just continuously think about.
Thank you so much, Ashwin and Mukul. I'll try to sum up now. Thanks, Ashwin and Mukul. It was a good session, and I had the privilege of knowing many things and learning across, and I'm sure the August audience would also be able to appreciate that. And key points were covered well by both the learned speakers, who had years of practical experience being brought behind the same. Areas covered include owning the own GCC or captive, as it is called, and the BOT GCC, challenges for GCC in the build, report, build, operate, and skills required for each of these cases, and integration issues coming up, and current state of GCC policies, as well as the important aspects which are likely to be faced due to challenges arising from AI and technologies, which will impact the GCC working, as also proving valuable for young chartered accountants planning to enter into this area. Value-added GCC services are one of the key areas to be considered, and stakeholder collaboration is going to be the main feature for the next 10 years at least. That's what has been the learning out of this. How we can bring strategic and innovative setups into the GCC, and the collaboration between GCC, policymaker and academics, which has been mentioned by Mukul, is a critical one, but in reality I don't see much is happening in this area, especially except in some of the top management institutes and the technical institutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We now request Managing Committee member CA Vinodkar to thank our distinguished speakers with memento as a token of appreciation. Let's give them a big round of applause, please. In the world of GCCs, Skill get you in, but excellence take you forward. With this, we are ending session 5.